Alright, what's up? I'm gonna be saying all the OIs in like 10-20 minutes. Alright, so the Renaissance was it was a movement during like the 15-ish century that it revived classical text, and like a bunch of people, kind of like Da Vinci and other guys, made a bunch of art. It was like the turning point, for your history. And then one of the things that came out of it was humanism. And humanism pretty much was just like the individual person is more important, and like the church started losing power when humanism came around. And then secularism is just less religious. Individualism is pretty much the same thing as humanism, just that like you value the individual more. Civic humanism is like applying humanistic values to like the actual like world-ish, so like kind of like the the city is a place for human fulfillment. And then one of the most important things during this time was the printing press. And this thing was it helped a bunch of new ideas spread around. And it was invented by Johannes Gutenberg. And so the most important thing during this time gotta be the printing press. Okay? And then vernacular language was pretty much non-Latin. And then patronage of the arts is like people like the Medici's buying crap ton of art. Centralization is monarchs like taking power away from the nobles and the church to get as much power to themselves as possible. The Holy Roman Empire is like this super Catholic place, and yeah, there's this book called The Prince, written by Machiavelli, and it was like about a ruler should be feared, not loved, and the balance of power is no other party should be more powerful than the other. And then the age of exploration was just first wave imperialism. The New World was the Americas, and the reason for them going to there was God, gold, and glory. Mercantilism was like keeping all the money to yourself into your country. So like no imports, pretty much, only exports. Missionaries were dudes who went over to the Americas to convert the Indians to Christianity. Cartography was map making. Navigational advances included things like the compass and better ships. The Columbian Exchange was the exchange between Europe and the Americas that exchange stuff like ideas, diseases, and like animals. This African slave trade is pretty self-explanatory. The price revolution is like the price of stuff going up because the demand was increasing and there's more people. Okay. The caste system was pretty much just a feudal system. And the calamitous 14th century, there was a ton of bad wars, but bad stuff. Like the Little Ice Age, which pretty much just killed a bunch of people because of famine. Obviously, the Black Death, which killed a lot of people. The 100 Years' War was in between England and France. That killed off a bunch of people. The Great Schism, it was there's like the Orthodox Church and the non-Orthodox Church, and like they split apart pretty much. And then the peasant revolts is just peasants. Okay, and then because of the calamitous events, the feudal system it becomes weaker. Okay, and then okay. Okay, so some important things you gotta know, but I think, are I don't know that guy. I don't think you gotta know these things. What the hell? Okay, this guy Henry VII. Like he won the War of the Roses, which the Tudor family won. And like this guy, he built the Star Chamber. He was like a centralized power guy, and like this guy was Catholic. Okay, and then Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. These guys were they're not important. Oh yeah, they did the Spanish Inquisition, and they killed a bunch of Protestants. So it's like these guys are super Catholic. Okay. And then okay, for Unit 2, some of the lives we got are Christian humanism, which is saying like, oh, let's combine the church and humanism, which is like, alright. Protestant Reformation is like this guy named Martin Luther, he led it with his 95 theses, and this thing pretty much let like Protestants have more power into the world, and pretty much marked the beginning of the weakening of the church. Erasmus was this guy before Luther that criticized the Catholic Church. He wrote the Book of Folly. And then Martin Luther was the guy who wrote the 95 Theses in 1517. Okay, and then John Calvin, like he followed Luther, and he created this Calvinism, and like he pretty much had like this super bad thing, or like this a lot of censorship place in Geneva, where like it was almost like the Soviet Union ish, just very religious. And then the Marburg Colloquy was like a meeting to solve disputes between Luther and Zwingli. And then Zwingli was this guy who just disagreed with Luther. And then the Counter-Reformation was like just trying to push away Protestantism, which involved like lots of Catholics doing stuff. And Anabaptists were they were radical people during the Reformation, and they wanted new interpretations of the Bible and lots of social change. Jesuits were people who went over to the America to convert, pretty much missionaries, and they were led by Ignatius of Loyola. The Council of Trent pretty much it just said, it was like a compromise between Protestants and Catholics. And Elizabeth Henry the Eighth was this like Superman bop, and like he didn't, since he wanted to divorce his first wife, he created the Anglican Church, and like his first wife was Catherine of Aragon. Elizabeth the First was the Queen of England, and she was like she was Protestant. Yeah, and she defeated Philip the First, or one of the Philips in the Spanish Armada. The French Wars were between the Huguenots and Catholics in France, and like the Edict of Nantes. The French Wars of religion pretty much was, I think there's like three Henrys. Henry the Fourth, which was Henry of Navarre, this other Henry, and this other Henry, but Henry of Navarre won, becoming Henry the Fourth, and he was a Huguenot, so he issued the Edict of Nantes, which allowed Huguenots to be in France. And then, okay, another thing was, before that, there was this woman named Catherine de Medici. She was like the regent of the other Henry that lost, and she tricked all these noble Huguenots to come to Henry of Navarre's thing, and she like killed a bunch of them, which is the Saint Bartholomew's Day massacre. Oh, and Elizabeth the First defeated Philip the Second in the Spanish Armada, and this Philip pretty much, under Philip the Second, Spain was super Catholic. The 30 Years' War was like between the whole Roman Empire and a bunch of other people. The whole Roman Empire got destroyed, and it ended in the Peace of Westphalia, which pretty much stated that like wars will no longer be fought because of religion, but now for politics. And then France joined in because they wanted to weaken, or someone wanted to weaken someone. The military revolution was caused by this guy named that one guy that like he had the trained army, and everyone's like, damn, I want that, something like that. And then the social dislocation was like after the 30 Years' War, people had nowhere to go. A bunch of places were destroyed. That's pretty much it. And the witchcraft was women were accused of being witches, and like a bunch of them were killed. You can't really do anything about being called a witch. Okay. And then next one we got is a bureaucracy is like, it's not a democracy, so only, let's say like only Senate or only the House of Reps is allowed to make decisions. That's pretty much what a democracy is. The English Civil War was between the Roundheads and the Roundheads and the Cavaliers. And then Charles the First was the Cavaliers. They ended up getting bodied by the Roundheads, which was Parliament, and Parliament won, which created a constitutional monarchy in England. Absolute monarchy is like the monarch has the most power. They don't want to share any power with anyone else. Divine right is when the monarch says, God gave me the power to rule. Louis XIV was like this super cool French guy, and he created the Palace of Versailles to like have the nobles on his good side. And then Jean-Baptiste Colbert, he was like a mercantilist. He was an advisor of Louis XIV. Peter the Great of Russia was this guy who went to Western Europe to try to modernize Russia. But then right when he came back, there was like a revolution, but he shut it down real quick. The Glorious Revolution was when the James II of England was replaced by William and Mary, because James II, that guy was too Catholic. So, and William and Mary, they were like kind of useless. They were just king and queen in title. So Parliament had most of the power. The Dutch Republic was just pretty much the Dutch Golden Age. The Dutch controlled most of the trade at this time. And yeah, they had the Bank of Amsterdam. No. Okay, the English Bill of Rights was like, just said Parliament had more power than the monarch. And the War of Spanish Succession. Okay, so Louis the 14th, like his grandson, was in line to rule Spain, right? But everyone's like, oh shit, Louis the 14th is gonna rule. He's gonna combine Spain and France. So like they had a war about that, and so what they decided was like France and Spain would just be separate. Baroque art was the art of the absolute monarchs. It was like very, very dark-ish. It showed power. And one of the thing they used is chiaroscuro. Okay, the Treaty of Utrecht ended the Spanish War of Succession, and yeah, that pretty much just said France and Spain can't be joined together. Frederick William, the Great Elector, that guy, he was the HRE Great Elector, but it later became Prussia. Okay, Unit 4 now. Okay. Scientific Revolution was just like a bunch of shit being created, invented. Copernicus was this guy who said, you suck, Galileo. No, not Galileo. One of those guys. And he said, we revolve around the sun. And Galileo, he did not invent the telescope. He improved it. And he said objects accelerate as they fall. Newton, this guy's just the gravity guy. Galen, this guy, he dissected humans, and he like discovered diseases and stuff. Bacon was like, do your own research and experiments. Descartes was like just reasoning-ish. Alchemy was pretty much magic. Astrology it's just like space stuff. Empiricism is like you gain knowledge from observation. The Enlightenment is like when people began to focus on like more stuff in the world that's not religious. So important people in the Enlightenment included Voltaire. Voltaire was this guy, like he was he wanted freedom, and he liked constitutional monarchy. Diderot, he just wrote the encyclopedia. Locke, this guy he just liked religious diversity and something else. Oh, forgot. Rousseau was the social contract guy, and he liked democracy. Natural rights were life, liberty, and property. The salons were like the places where women went to discuss Enlightenment stuff. Adam Smith was the capitalist guy. Free trade was just you're allowed to buy and sell goods anywhere, like free market. Deism was like a god exists but doesn't do anything. Skepticism is just doubting shit. Atheism is that they don't believe in anything. Religious toleration is that like you're not you don't care what your subjects do, what religion they have, and balance of power is that. Um, okay, so Hobbes, he wrote the Leviathan, and he was a social contract guy. So like everything was chaotic, okay, and so this guy just hated people, and so you need like an absolute monarch. This is what Hobbes said, and Locke was this guy who said, "Oh, the army, no, the state, the only thing the state should do is protect the natural rights." Yep, that's it. And then, yeah, and people were born with natural rights. Okay, now for Unit 5, we got, okay, um, the Peace of Westphalia was in 1648. The Peace of Augsburg, what was the Peace of Augsburg? Uh-oh, I don't know. Spanish Armada was in 1588. The Peace of Augsburg was in 1555. Okay, so we're now somewhere. Okay, we're in like this late 1700s now. The French Revolution was like the French, they didn't want to have absolute monarchy anymore. It was 4 phases. Okay, the liberal phase was like the tennis involved stuff, like the tennis court oath. Third estate was mad since they had no power. And then after that, they made the Declaration of the Rights of Man, and just gave men more rights. And some woman, I forgot her name, she wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Women. The execution of Louis XVI, yeah. The Jacobins were radical people who wanted more reforms, and Robespierre was like one of the heads of the more radical people, and he was the leader of the Committee of Public Safety. And in the Reign of Terror, this guy, Robespierre and a bunch of other people just like killed anyone who they suspected of ruining the revolution. Toussaint, the Revolutionary Army, was this army led by Napoleon to gain like a bunch of land. It helped him gain like the Grand Empire. Okay, Toussaint L'Ouverture was this guy in Haiti that helped escape helped Haiti gain independence. Napoleon was this general that later became the emperor of France through a coup. Nationalism, this is like the beginning of nationalism, and like nationalism was the pride for one's country. Okay, and then Congress of Vienna was like, okay, so after Napoleon, this is French, this is all the French land after Napoleon stuff, right? And like everyone else is like, they needed to divide this up, right? So just like split this in half, so like everyone could have an equal part of France after Napoleon. And then okay, the civil constitution of the clergy was this thing that like it just to let the church come back into France after the French Revolution, which Napoleon did. The Constitution of 1791 is the thing that created a constitutional monarchy in France. Okay, the Committee of Public Safety was this thing that they just killed anyone who thought was a traitor. The March on Versailles was this thing led by women, and like they were mad as hell because like Louis XVI and his wife were hoarding bread, and so like everyone's going hungry. So they stormed Versailles, and they somehow managed to capture Louis XVI and his wife. Okay, the Concordat of 1801 made Catholicism the main religion of France, but made the church support Napoleon. And then the 100 Days is the time period in which Napoleon returned from Elba and marched back to France to re-seize power. And then that's Unit 5. Unit 6A. The agricultural revolution was like a bunch of new farming stuff was created, like the seed drill and like other stuff. The cottage industry was like the industry which lots of cottage would produce. Women and children worked here. Textiles were were stuff made in the Industrial Revolution. Laissez-faire is like, oh, the government don't interfere, don't intervene. Railroads were invented during this time, and they're just better transportation. Urbanization was like, more of the population goes to urban zones or the city-ish. Then monopolies are when like one company has like an entire share for one single thing, which allows them to have like lots of money. Trade unions were like when a bunch of workers like came together and then like to just advocate for stuff. It's kind of like a strike-ish, like, you know, when a teacher strike, that's sort of what a labor union is. And then this is when socialism came up, so this is maybe around like the mid 1800s ish, or early mid 1800s. Socialism is like, oh, the government needs to help the people. It's kind of like what Locke said. And Luddites are people that hated the textile industry. Chartists are people who wanted radical government reforms. The Joint Stock Investment Bank was like just pretty much the stock market of the early ages. And the steam engine is pretty self-explanatory. And the Factory Acts was stuff that happened in Britain. And it was like a bunch of Factory Acts didn't allow children to work that much. And the Great Exhibition was this showcase in London. It was pretty much like London flexing off all its stuff to the rest of the world, flexing off all its industrial stuff. Oh, and then Marxism. This was like super important. Marxism was invented by Karl Marx, and it was like all our struggles are class struggle is the reason for conflict, and he believed that the lower class would win in a class struggle. Okay, for 6B, we got, we got proletariat, so those are just the working class. Oh, I forgot to mention this, the bourgeoisies, those are the semi-rich people, but not the middle class. No, they're almost nobles, but not nobles. And then the liberalism is like, oh my god, I love enlightenment. Universal male suffrage is like all men get the right to vote. Conservatism is they hate the Enlightenment and they want to go back to monarchies. Nationalism is like people who share the same culture and same language should have their independence. And Romanticism was like viewing the world through rose-tinted glasses, just like nothing can go wrong, everything is perfect. The modern police force is just pretty much like the beginning of what police are right now. The Concert of Europe. Oh, this was like a conservative thing led by Metternich, and this is like, if any guy has a revolution, we all stand help them. Okay, the Congress system was like just representatives to make decisions. Metternich was this guy who just led the Congress of Europe, or the Concerts of Europe. The revolutions of 1848 were a bunch of revolutions where people wanted to gain their independence, but most of them failed. And like in Les Miserables, this is like the main stuff. The cult of domesticity was that a woman's job was to serve the household. Mass leisure just arose because people had now have more free time. Consumerism was the social order that people started purchasing more stuff. And mass marketing is just advertisement. Okay, Unit 7, imperialism. Okay, the Crimean War was a war between Russia, France, and Britain. And they wanted territory in the Ottoman Empire. Russians got like destroyed, and like everyone was mad. Like Nicholas I, like this it ruined his reign. Italian unification was because of these guys, Cavour and Garibaldi. So Cavour was this guy in Northern Europe, and Garibaldi was this guy in Southern Europe, and they like pretty much got Italy together. And that was Italian unification. German unification was led by Otto von Bismarck, where he got together all of the German states and he raided France. He like completely embarrassed them and had a party in the Palace of Versailles. Okay, the dual monarchy in Austria-Hungary was like Austria-Hungary is super weak right now. Like it's kind of weak, so they needed to have a dual monarchy. Since like the Hungarians wanted some freedom too. Realpolitiks are people that set aside their personal beliefs for the advancement of the country. Charles Darwin was a biologist. You know, the only thing he did in AP Euro was social Darwinism, which was pretty much the beginning of racism. Like, stronger devours the weaker. It's kind of like the reasoning for the scramble for Africa. Realism was like just portraying stuff more real. Materialism was like, having lots of stuff is important. Positivism is like, I don't know. Anarchism is like there's no rules, like just like the League of Nations tried to fix anarchism, but you know how that shit went. That was terrible. And then nationalism now was like, oh, my country is better than yours. Anti-Semitism was, I hate Jews. No, was hating Jews. Zionism was advocating for Jews and like saying they needed land in Israel. And then compulsory education was like, education's now mandatory. Okay, feminism was just women rights, advocating for women rights. The Dreyfus affair was pretty much when this Jewish guy, he was accused of um, selling, no, giving, he was accused of being a traitor, but this was false. And, oh, the alliances, the Bismarck system alliances. So there were 3 alliances, I think. And Bismarck's entire goal was to like just isolate France. This guy hated France. So one of the things he created was the League of 3 Emperors. And so this one was between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia. So we got the Germans, we got the AH, we got Russia. Okay, and now you got the secret Austro-German, which is pretty self-explanatory, Austria and German, and alliance of the 3 emperors. It was just no. Okay, Germany, 3 emperors was Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia. The Austro-Hungary one was Austria and Germany, Austro-Germany, and then the Triple Alliance was Italy, Germany, and Austria-Hungary. Reinsurance treaty was like between Russia and Russia, just to reinsure Russia. Did they want to be left alone? And then the League of 3 Emperors? No. Okay, so the Balkans were just like the Mediterranean area next to Italy. It's kind of like where Greece is. The great powers was pretty much Britain, France, Germany. Relativism is nothing is absolute. Freud was this psychologist guy, and then he's like the psychoanalysis guy. Einstein, that guy is pretty cool. Oh, quantum mechanics, there's no way you need to know that. Impressionism is like realism sucks. Post-impressionism was more abstract. Cubism is like art that you can't even tell what the hell it is. Okay, now we got the World Wars. Okay, World War One. So pretty much World War One. In the beginning, this Austrian guy called Archduke Ferdinand got killed by a Serbian, and so the Austria-Hungary said, Austria was like, yo, what the hell? And he gave him like an impossible ultimatum. And so, like, of course they couldn't fulfill it, so Austria declared war, and because of Austria and Germany's thing, Germany also declared war, but then France was like, no, and so they also declared war. It's like a mess, and it's just because of Bismarck's alliances. Oh, and after Bismarck, this guy named Kaiser Wilhelm II, he fired Bismarck and let the reinsurance treaty expire, which let France and Russia like ally themselves with each other. Okay, so the Schlieffen Plan was this plan where Germany planned to go through Belgium to invade France. So you know how Belgium is right here, and then France is right here, and Germany's right here. So they wanted to go through like that to get into France. And then trench warfare was just like, it's pretty much a war of attrition. Like, no, you don't win until the other side runs out of materials. And then pretty much what they did was there's a trench right here and there's a trench right here. Okay, so when they stop firing, they run up here. but then they shouldn't start firing. So it's a waste of time. Total war is like when you put everything you have towards the war. So like you turn all factories into like war factories, or like you turn car manufacturing places into tank manufacturing things. Okay, and then the Paris Peace Conference was the thing after World War One that like ended it. This was in 1919. The League of Nations was the thing that Woodrow Wilson did. They said that pretty much just beginning NATO, but this thing sucked because not even the U.S. joined it. The Treaty of Versailles was terrible for Germany. It gave them like a mountain of debt and made them demilitarize, and it was gave them the war guilt clause, which pretty much put all the blame on Germany for the war. And the Weimar Republic was this republic who was a terrible republic who ruled Germany, but it was quickly overrun by none other than Hitler. And Hitler was this guy who he was the German chancellor. And the chancellor is like the head of state, pretty much. And this guy, he built up the German army. He built up everything. He just started invading everywhere. The Russian Revolution was like where these Russian Mensheviks and Bolsheviks are useless, but the Bolsheviks, they overthrew the Russian government and replaced it with the other government. But that other government failed, and so the Bolsheviks took over, and it became the Soviet Union, led by Vladimir Lenin, and Leon Trotsky. Okay, the overproduction happened because like it was total war, so like everyone put all they had towards the war, and so after the war, like people had nothing to do since war was over. The Great Depression was like I think this is after the stock market crash, so lots of Europeans started investing into the U.S. stock market, but since there's so much investment, like there's so much demand, right? But there wasn't that much. There's so much, like people were buying and buying and buying, but then, like since there's so many people had stocks, it like the price significantly lowered. It was like a crash. Okay. Yeah, and then the stock market crash, Great Depression. The Widow Entente was an alliance between Czechoslovakia and Romania. What the hell was that? The Dawes Plan was like this plan where the U.S. helped out Germany, and so Germany could pay back everyone else. What? Okay, the Treaty of Locarno was the agreement that between Britain, France, Germany, and Belgium, and Italy, that said if Germany violates their western borders, then it's war. The Kellogg-Briand Pact was just trying to say war was illegal. And fascism was like, I hate it's like they hate communism, and it's like ruled by a single person, like a dictator. Isolationism is like staying away from other countries' stuff. And appeasement is like Great Britain and France, like just letting Hitler take whatever territory he wants to avoid a war. Blitzkrieg was the tactic used by Hitler during his attacks, and what he did was pretty much use both land bombings and tanks at the same time, a bunch of soldiers and troops. So like you have tanks like this and a bunch of tanks, soldiers, Yeah, airs flying up. So it's just like they took over Poland in like a few weeks, I think. Nazi Germany was like so Nazis was the national with social national something it's a socialist it's standing for something like that. Okay. Okay, and this Nazi regime was also called the Third Reich, which is the Third German Empire. The First German Empire being the whole the Holy Roman Empire. The second one being the Unified Germany, and there's the third one being Third Reich, Nazi Germany. The Holocaust was orchestrated by Hitler, where he killed lots and lots of Jews in concentration camps. Propaganda is pretty self-explanatory. Mussolini was this Italian fascist, but this guy, he sucked. Francisco Franco, this guy was also a fascist, and his side of the Spanish Civil War, he won. And he was supported by Hitler and Mussolini. Oh, the famous painting from the Spanish Civil War was a bombing of Guernica. I don't know. Stalin was this Soviet guy. Another mustache guy, and he was the Soviet dude. The new economic policy was like in the USSR that wanted to modernize it, and then following that was the 5 years plan, which wanted to rapidly industrialize Russia. So it sucked. The liquidization of kulaks just like got rid of all landowners, and the purges were things that got rid of any traitors. It's kind of like the reign of terror. And then the Ukrainian famine was because like no people didn't want to give up the land. They just stopped sending them food, so like a bunch of them died. The Wannsee Conference was conference between like Nazi officials, where they just said like, oh, if you want to win, we gotta kill all Jews. The Italian invasion of Ethiopia was where like the Italians like they're trash, so they lost Ethiopia. They lost the Africans, which were behind in industrialization. The annexation of Austria was Germany, like they took over Austria, which violated the Treaty of Versailles. And then the Munich Agreement was like, Germany, you can take over Sudetenland land. And the Nazi-Soviet Aggression Pact was, yeah, just that. The Nuremberg laws were laws that's just about the Aryan race or the Germans. Okay. The hot wars, or like actual wars, the arms race was a conflict between the two great superpowers, Russia and Soviet Union and America. And they said so it was like a dick measuring contest. NATO was North Atlantic Treaty Organizations, and it was pretty much like if Russia attacks you, we all attack Russia. Comecon was the Russian equivalent of NATO. The Warsaw Pact was the same thing pretty much. It was just Russia allying with all its satellite nations. German reunification is West and East Germany being reunited. European Union was like it's just a bunch of European countries, but Western European countries coming together. to have like the same currency, the euro, and then Britain, being special, didn't want to participate. The European Economic Community was the free trade. The separatist movements are like in Poland, or they wanted political separation from the Soviets. Ethnic cleansing was like kind of like the Holocaust. Decolonization was like self-explanatory. The mandate system was like, oh, if you lost the war, then we can govern you until you can govern yourself. The nationalist movement was pretty much just that. The Marshall Plan was the U.S. thing that helped all of the Western European countries. And then, the economic miracle was, just because of the Marshall Plan, like all Western Europe recovered super quickly, and like their economy and industry was better than before. Welfare programs was like everyone gets free medical help and financial aid paid for by taxes. The Soviet bloc was just like Eastern Europe. Nikita Khrushchev was this guy after Stalin, and he did not like Stalin. He wanted de-Stalinization. Okay. This guy, Nikolai Gorbachev, this guy was the last leader of the USSR. This guy, he implemented glasnost and perestroika. Perestroika allowed for private ownership in the USSR, and glasnost allowed for more free speech. Existentialism was like people are free to determine their own meaning. Postmodernism is like it just challenged convention, and industrialized warfare was like just war with more industry, like more advanced war. Nuclear proliferation was the U.S. and Soviet Union building up a bunch of nukes. Totalitarianism is where it's just a single person rules your country. Communism is where everyone is equal, economically equal, no matter of your status. The Second Vatican Council was this thing that pretty much just let Catholicism back into Europe. Americanization is self-explanatory. Consumer culture is where people bought a bunch of stuff. Globalization is where aspects of society began operating on a global scale. Feminism is the movement for gender. Feminism is just feminism. The baby boom was like after the wars, a bunch of babies were born. The civil rights movement was like Martin Luther King, just that. Green parties were just green parties, yeah. Earth should not be polluted, stuff like that. The student revolts of I don't know. Okay, that's it. That's like all the OI.